Hello, in this unit we're going to talk about not and negation. So let's get started. So we're going to have a new concept, a new logical concept, the concept of negation. It's one you're familiar with, but it's one we'll be adding to our language, which we haven't added yet. So remember, in chapter 2 we saw a list of some important logical concepts: if, not, and or, and we've added if, and now we're going to add not to our language. So remember the unhappy couple example. You're in the airport, you overhear the following conversation. She says, "If you don't confess, I'm leaving you." And he says, "Nothing." And she says, "I'm leaving then." And he says, "What? No, it's not true that I won't confess." And you draw a conclusion from this. You conclude he will confess. Okay? So your reasoning, well, at first you're just listening and you're not reasoning. You're not moving from one claim to another. You're just absorbing information from the world, which is a great way to learn. It's just not reasoning. But then you hear him say, "It's not true that I won't confess," and you believe him, or at least, yeah. And you think it's not true that he won't confess. And from that, you infer, so he will confess. And this is a valid inference. Now, maybe you're wrong. Maybe it's not true that he won't confess. Maybe he was lying, or maybe he is planning on confessing, but he's going to change his mind, or who knows. But in any case, the step from the claim, "It's not true that he won't confess," to the claim, "He will confess," that step in reasoning, that's a valid step. If the premise is true, "It's not true that he won't confess," then so is the conclusion, "He will confess." And that's true no matter what. And why is that? It's because of the meaning of not. And so that's what we're going to study now. So consider also the sentence, "He won't confess." So he will confess and he won't confess cannot both be true. If one is true, then the other has to be false, no matter what. In any situation whatsoever, they're not both true. And when we can describe that by saying that they're inconsistent, or summarize that by saying that they're inconsistent. And when we say inconsistent, we just mean they cannot both be true. So inconsistency is another logical notion like validity. Validity is for arguments. It says, no matter what, if the premises are true, so is the conclusion. Inconsistency says, no matter what, these two sentences cannot both be true. Or you could have a bigger group of sentences, and if they were inconsistent, there's no way they could all be true. At least one of them would have to be false. So, looks like not has some important logical properties. We have this argument, and it's a valid argument. And we have these two sentences, and they're inconsistent. And our logical system should capture both of those facts and other facts about negation. So, we're going to want to add some way of handling negation to our language. So if we look at "he won't confess," you'll remember that we symbolize this with just W. Now, W, while it's a bad symbolization of "he won't confess." It's not terrible. It's a sentence of the logical language that we've paired with a sentence of the form of English, but it's not really good symbolization because it doesn't capture all of the structure, all of the arrangements, all the important parts of "he won't confess." So note that W is atomic. And do you remember what atomic means? It means that it contains no sentences. So W contains no sentences. There are no sentences that are part of W. And also, "he won't confess," that isn't atomic. It contains a sentence. It contains a sentence, "he will confess," and then "he will confess," we've added the not, and we formed this bigger sentence. And so the bigger sentence, "he won't confess," or "he will not confess," contains a sentence, "he will confess." So "he won't confess" is not atomic, but W is atomic. So they're different in that way. Already we can see that one has parts, the other doesn't. W has no parts. "He won't confess" does have a sentence as a part, namely, "he will confess." Also, there's nothing about negation in W, but obviously there is something in "he won't confess" involving negation, namely the not in won't. And we just saw that not is logically important. It involves, it makes sentences be inconsistent with one another, and it helps to explain why some arguments are valid. So if W is not a good symbolization of "he won't confess," what is? Well, we'll see that in the next video when we actually introduce the negation sign for our new language. So I will see you there.